and welcome to another Awakening Your Health Potential episode. Today we have Suzy Labrie, who is a holistic chiropractor, friend and colleague of mine. I've known Suzy for, 15 years or so. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to let her introduce herself in terms of her qualifications. And then we're going to have a really good chat about viruses and immunity and how we can really enhance our immunity during this global pandemic that we're in. So welcome, Suzy, and let's start with all your qualifications.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And, it's great to be on here with you. So my qualifications are, essentially I have a master's in chiropractic, and that also includes a Bachelor of Science with honours in biochemistry and pharmacology and anatomy. But as well as that, I've done so many extracurricular courses. I've got qualifications in applied kinesiology and musculoskeletal acupuncture, in and NET, which is neuro-emotional technique, and a lot of other chiropractic techniques. And a lot of...
How long have you been practicing for now, Suzy?
I've been practicing for 20 years. So before I was that, I was in business, and I worked in the health industry as a rep, as a medical rep, okay. For Johnson & Johnson Medical.
Okay.
So I was a lot in hospitals, a lot infection control.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the moment we're kind of in this middle of this pandemic, or maybe on the other side of it, don't know. And I think there's a lot of fear in the community. There's like this real global consciousness of fear, and we're being fed a lot of information that might not be 100% up to date. I think a lot of the things that we're being fed is a bit out of date. So I wanted to talk to you about viruses and immunity generally, just so people can get a bit of a grasp on how they can support themselves and kind of navigate their way through this, because I don't think there's any way of getting around it. You just have to go kind of straight through the middle.
Yep, I agree. I mean, it certainly is changing on a minute-by-minute basis, and especially people are getting updated. There's new research coming out. I heard the other day that there was a new drug available or in the wings. So, there's lots happening. And I think also that the understanding of how to treat people that have this virus is also expanding and becoming more refined. So I think that a lot of the beliefs and the original things that came out are perhaps no longer as valid as they were.
Yeah, well, we've been in it for, 8 months now, really.
Yeah,
when it really became an issue. So let's start with, what's a virus and what's the difference with a retrovirus, which COVID-19 is, and the whole coronavirus family. Can you inform people about all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, the scientific definition of viruses is that they are just small chemical messengers, or they're signalling devices, actually. So they're not really alive, which is a fascinating thing, because everyone talks about viruses as if they were like a bacteria or even a fungus or a protozoa, which are live organisms with a nucleus and a brain, I guess, as it were. But viruses aren't that. They're just something that is excreted from the original cell. Usually 50% of viruses come from bacteria, so usually from bacteria, and then they're excreted. It's a device that's excreted in the form of genetic material, either DNA or RNA, and it's protected by a protein shell. And viruses can only replicate in the cells of other organisms. And viruses have been infiltrating people ever since people have been alive. In fact, 50% of our human genome, it comes from viruses. So we are composed of viruses, little pieces of DNA from other organisms on the planet. And in a way, that's how the planet communicates, is by excreting these chemical messengers.
That's an interesting thought.
Yes. And 10% of the genome are retroviruses. Now, there are extremely large numbers of viruses in the soil and the water and the air, and they are often transmitted to many other organisms, as I said, but they all have different specific functions, and they carry out different roles depending on where they come from and what they're composed of. So they bind to the cell, they infiltrate the cell, they transform the DNA of the cell to make its own genetic material, and then they integrate into the nucleus of the cell, and then they replicate, and then they explode with more viruses coming out. And then they can go on to reinfect other cells. So it's a very fast form of communication, really. And there's lots of different theories about why viruses exist, but one of them, and I'll just mention this because I found it fascinating before I talk about retroviruses, and that is from Dr. Zach Bush, who says that it is the planet's response to the threat of extinction. So the more that the planet is disturbed and the more toxicity there is in the planet and the more there is a threat to extinction, the more the organisms in the planet respond by excreting the viruses, and the more toxic it is, the more toxic the viruses. So in a way, it's a message. Wow. Yeah.
And if we look at what's where we are in terms of the globally with that, that's really fascinating.
Right.
Who said that?
Dr. Zach Bush.
Okay.
He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
So he's you can Google him. He's just brilliant. I love all of his work. He's very switched on, very poetic as well. And he really has a good understanding of what's going on in the planet.
Interesting.
So let's just have a little quick discussion about retroviruses. So, for example, HIV is a retrovirus.
Yeah.
And they can become embedded in our DNA, the retroviruses, and then they get excreted or pushed into activity when the human genome or the strand of DNA becomes stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be dormant, and they can be passed down from the mother to the child, and they can be dormant for many years until the person's body becomes overly stressed, or there's not enough repair of DNA happening, and then that section of the DNA carrying the retrovirus is exposed. So that's why sometimes when people are very, very tired or overly stressed or overly toxic, that they all of a sudden come down with something horrible.
Are some cancers thought to be retroviruses?
Yeah, 100%.
That kind of makes sense with that kind of. Is it all cancers or just some?
Some. Yeah. But it's also, like, it wouldn't surprise me though if it is most cancers, to be honest, because most people get cancer when they are overly toxic or overly, pushed beyond their limits.
Or whatever.
Yeah, but it doesn't explain all of them.
Yeah.
So the retroviruses are what's known as an RNA virus, which is a different type of genetic material. And they can, and there's also, so there's a way of keeping them safe and locked in, which is to remain healthy. And in this kind of fast society, many people don't even think about, well, can't I just take a drug? They don't think about looking after their health. They just think, oh, well, that's okay. Medical science will look after me. But there is no substitute for health. It's insurance. Yeah. The best form of insurance is to look after yourself.
Yeah. And the reality is we're exposed to viruses all the time, right?
Right.
So, like, if we can keep those barriers of defense and containing those things like retroviruses by keeping everything functioning well, then they won't actually have to necessarily have an impact on us.
Correct. We can maintain our health to the best of our ability, and then when we do get struck down, that's something that then we turn to medicine. That's what medicine is for. It's for acute situations, and that's when we need the speed of medical intervention as opposed to just generally the looking after your health is more of a long-term, slower commitment.
Yeah. And what about, like, how does the COVID fit in with the coronavirus family, and can you explain that for people?
Yes. So coronavirus is part of the SARS group of of viruses, part of the SARS family of viruses, which includes MERS as well. So SARS and MERS stands for, I can't even remember what it stands for now, but MERS is the Mediterranean version of it. Mm-hmm. So SARS-1 appeared in 2002 in China, and it only lasted for 2 years, and that was the same with MERS. Mm-hmm. So it appears that these type of viruses that only ever last for 2 years, and they come in waves, and they usually come in waves of 3. Mm-hmm. So far we've had the second wave, and so presumably we will get a third wave.
And do the waves tend to get less in intensity?
Yeah, the second wave is usually the worst. Mm-hmm. It's more intense, okay. but the third wave is not so bad.
And then what happens to them after that?
They just disappear.
That's just weird, isn't it?
I know, right?
People say we have to live with this forever, and apart from like that thought, my kind of feeling is, well, the quicker we all get immune to it, then and get exposed to it on some level by keeping ourselves as well as possible, and obviously protecting those vulnerable in the community. Like, we don't want the people that are vulnerable to necessarily have to deal with it, obviously, but for the general healthy, reasonably young, fit, healthy person, if we can keep our health and immunity good and be exposed to it, then we kind of don't really have to worry about it that much, do we?
I think so, and I think Australia is a good example of that. We tend to be very healthy in our in where we sit in the Western world in terms of our health. We're very high up there. But for example, the US, they're like 38th in the world in terms of the general health of the population, and in some cases much worse than that if you include obesity, when they become like 45th or something. So that we tend to be healthy. We have a better healthcare system, and so our bodies can tolerate attack of a virus, for example, much better. And you can see that with our statistics, even though, of course, with Melbourne and Victoria it's quite intense at the moment, but our death rate is quite low, comparatively speaking, and a lot of those death rates, I'm assuming, would have comorbidities.
Yes, yeah, totally. And there is the issue of now practitioners can actually tick the COVID-19 box in terms of cause of death without actually testing for it. So if they suspect that's an enough, and that's really going to push up the death rate. I was listening to a Tony Robbins podcast, and he's done a few on the COVID-19 and what's happening in the States with a number of different physicians, and they all kind of get round to the same sort of thing. But numbers are pushed up, and a lot of the statistics, even in the States, are much, much, much lower than what the media is putting out. It's like the media are a bit stuck on the original stats.
Yeah.
The original stats coming out of China, which, we've now had 8 months of statistics that we can, look at a lot more clearly.
Well, and I should just mention, I just realised I shouldn't have said Mediterranean. It was Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Thought I better correct that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, but it's true. The statistics are changing all the time, and the original death rate, I think it's, once you get the real numbers, I think we'd be able to make a lot more informed decisions.
Yeah, I think so too. And the swab test, like the swab test that's around at the moment is, I think, really valid when it comes to whether people are fighting it, have current exposure. And so they know that they should isolate and make sure they stay away from those that are vulnerable. But there's also an antibody test as well. Can you kind of describe what the difference is in those testing procedures and what information they give you and the relevance of both of them?
Yes. Well, the swab test is really just inserting a swab up the person's nose to swab for presence of the virus in the mucous membranes of the nasal passages, which would assume that it's in the respiratory tract, or definitely, in the digestive tract even. And so that's just assuming that the person, if that's positive, then that obviously the person has currently been exposed and is fighting off the virus. And that's assuming that it has gone into the respiratory tract as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I don't actually, from some of the work and the research that I've done on it, it has a specific entry point, which I can explain in a minute. And those entry points are not only in the lung, but in the cardiovascular system, the kidney, and the digestive. So it could be that the virus is only in one part of the body and hasn't fully gone to another part yet. So that's why it's a snapshot in time rather than a definitive diagnosis. So someone could test negative, for example, and then a few days later they could be positive, or it could be in another part of their body. So that's the swab test. And I believe that there are mistakes associated with that swab test, because I personally know someone who lined up to get tested, didn't in the end have time because it took so long, and left before they were tested, and then were phoned the next day and said, "Oh, you're positive." So they were like, well, I had my name down to be tested, but I had to leave and I never ended up being tested. So somehow they got that wrong.
Human error.
So there's human error. And so then so that's the swab test. And then if we want to go into the antibody test, well, that's a test of what antibodies your body has produced to the virus, which is way more definitive as to whether you've ever had it or been exposed to it, or have been fighting it. And the antibody test can tell you if your body has produced antibodies to COVID-19, which would assume then that you have some kind of herd immunity to it. So your body has dealt with it and recovered from it, and so therefore you have a type of immunity to it. So testing for the antibodies, I would imagine, is a way more profound and revealing test, because it lets you know if you've ever had it and if you've recovered from it, and that would give a much better idea of how many people in the population have actually been exposed to it and dealt with it.
That would be so good. I mean, I know Nutripath in Australia are doing that test now. I think it's $60 or something, and I know there's companies in America doing it, and it basically will just give us much more accurate statistics of that exposure. And I think, originally, because it is such a contagious disease, and it was the first time we were exposed to it globally, the fear of the running our health system and our hospital system way beyond its capacity happened in a number of places. But I think we were quite lucky. So by the time it came to Australia, we had seen what had happened overseas. The hospitals and the health system were much more prepared, and we just haven't had that issue at all, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
And so even with the second wave, again, I'm not sure what the current statistics are. They're changing all the time. But we seem to be, even though the infection rate's quite high, people are still managing to stay home and self-isolate and not go into hospital and not go into ICU, not overwhelm the whole health system.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the good thing about it. And I guess the more people globally that have been exposed and there's less stress on the systems, I guess that's when we will be able to start interacting globally again.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a really good opportunity for everyone to reevaluate the health of the planet, the kind of stress that we are under every day, because it wasn't until all the manic things stopped that people were able to consider, the impact that it was having on their health anyway. So in a way, I think it's kind of been a good wake-up call for all of us.
Totally. I think that whole concept of the health of the planet and the health of the people on it, I feel like that, a lot of people I'm in contact with, but even a bit further than that, are really taking their health seriously, because people are feeling like they want to do something about it. And then lockdown has been so interesting, watching the planet recover so fast, like
right,
with dolphins in Venice and smog lifting from, the horizon, I think in China or Hong Kong or something like
in
that.
Wuhan,
So fast. It's crazy. So the planet has got to recover, and we've kind of gone through this little bit of an incubation or cocoon or isolation to help us kind of reevaluate our stress levels and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that has definitely been a really big plus. But in terms of, people really wanting to work on their immunity, because people are very conscious about that at the moment, there's so many different ways you can look at it, but maybe you can kind of talk about that generally.
Yeah, well, I'm a big component. I'm a big proponent, component maybe, for health. I live, eat, breathe it. To me, health is the most incredible gift. And so it starts from what you feed yourself every day to what you expose yourself to, and to what's kind of even, spiritual practices where you can go into a meditation or something like that to relieve stress, to really be aware of what you're doing, and practicing that presence, that awareness is really important. And so all of those are lifestyle choices that we can make, and that's within our control. There are other things that are not always in our control, and that would be the level of toxicity in the planet and in our environment. And so I do believe that it's a good kind of like a biohack way to live your life by taking supplements. And, we don't all eat food grown on the land in clean soil. We don't all have, we don't all live on farms or out of the city and things like that. So those kind of situations, it's important to protect yourself and your health. And one of the top things that I use all the time is vitamin A. I know a lot of people talk about vitamin C, and vitamin C is important as well. But vitamin A is, I call it the breath nutrient. It supports the mucous membranes of the lungs. It's anti-cancer. It's involved in so many immune responses and reactions. It's one of the best things you can take. It helps your liver to detox. It's very supportive of the liver itself. So taking just a regular vitamin A supplement, whether it's retinol or beta-carotene, the one warning that there is with vitamin A is if you're trying to get pregnant. There was a couple of studies that came out a long time ago that showed potentially that it has some effect on the fetus, but that was in massively high doses. So, of course, if you're trying to fall pregnant, or if you are pregnant, maybe a good idea to avoid vitamin A for that period of time. But generally, you can take so much of it, and there's virtually very little side effects. It's an amazing vitamin. So that would be the first thing. Is that in
your book? Which I'm just going to hold up now. Is vitamin A in your book? I love how in Suzy's book you give each nutrient that you talk about a name. Like, I love it. So, for example, Sammy is the life enhancer.
Yeah.
Vitamin B2, the secret weapon. And I love it. So vitamin A is what? The breath nutrient.
The breath nutrient.
I love it. Beautiful.
Yeah. And there's been like a lot of studies on people with asthma where vitamin A is really, taken away most of the symptoms of asthma. There's some classic studies on that as well. Give Asthma the Big A is one book I read on it.
Okay.
And it does help immensely. Makes a huge difference.
What else?
Well, of course, then the vitamin C. Yeah. If you do have some virus, sometimes IV vitamin C is good as well, just to have a big dose to top up your immune system. But generally just a regular dose of vitamin C, like 1 gram twice a day or 2 grams twice a day if you're in the middle of cold and flu season, is also excellent. There is, if you want to get into more of the detailed, more kind of technical side of the immunity, a lot of the mushrooms, the Chinese mushrooms, the reishi, shiitake, coriolis, and cordyceps mushrooms are also quite amazing for the immune system. And it's good to take those regularly. I freeze mine so that there's no chance of there being any mold or anything in them.
Right, yeah.
And it doesn't harm the mushrooms. So there's those kind of things. There's garlic. If for those people that like to eat garlic, it's great, but you can also take the garlic capsules. There is selenium, which is an amazing nutrient. If you look at a selenium crystal, it is this beautiful, clear, transparent white. And you just imagine that white light going through your entire body and cleansing out the toxins, which is what selenium does. It's also really good for depression. It's also really good for or anything that involves immunity and cleaning out the system. So it's an antitoxin type mineral. The other really important mineral, and especially in this current situation, is zinc. And zinc is, again, I call zinc the nurturing nutrient because it looks after you just like a mother does. It cleans toxins out of your blood. It helps your body digest and absorb nutrients, and it's very, very important for the immune system. It's very, very important for pregnancy. Zinc babies are happy babies, I always say. And then the other thing,
with the zinc particularly, there's so many forms of zinc that you
there is.
Can you give a rundown on, which
ones
generally are better absorbed?
Yeah. Well, zinc carnosine is quite a good one because you don't get that nausea feeling, because sometimes with some zincs you can feel a little bit nauseous. Zinc carnosine happens to protect it carries the zinc in deeper. So that's quite a good supplement to take. Zinc citrate is really good. It's very gentle. We have a supplement called Zinc Chloride, which is like sodium chloride, which is salt, and so it's readily absorbed really, really easily, and it's good for kids because it's in a liquid form. There is also Zinc Picolinate, and there's probably a few. Zinc ascorbate is another one, which is good because you're combining ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C. There's about 10 different forms of zinc. What you can do is just try different ones and find out the one that works for you, or if you know someone who's a kinesiologist, perhaps they can muscle test for you. One of the other most important things about zinc is you want it to be carried into the cells. And if you take it in conjunction with quercetin or quercetin, which is Quercetin, that's a bioflavonoid, and that's known as a zinc ionophore. So what that means is it carries zinc into the cells. So if you take zinc and quercetin together, you're onto a winner.
Yeah, nice. Right, keep going. I interrupted you about the zinc if you wanted to. I don't know if you were thinking about something else.
No, that's good. The zinc is, so in terms of, you mean in terms of listing what supplements are beneficial? No, it's fine. It's good. I'm glad you took me down that because it's important for people to know. There's a few other things. There's certainly there's a situation for a lot of people called methylation, where the body takes, so there's a reaction in the body which occurs 80 billion times a second. So it occurs in every cell in the body, and it's like the motor of the body.
I was actually just talking to Margie Smith about this, and she was as I'm saying methylation, this is happening about 1 million times.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And so with methylation, it's the currency of the body. It's like the body gives methyl groups to make things work. So it recycles them and puts them into reactions in order to make the reaction work like it's supposed to. Methyl groups are like the smallest unit, CH3, or one of the smallest units. And so methylation is really important. And as well as that, ironically, or maybe not ironically, over the years, viruses and bacteria and other microorganisms have attacked that whole system, because that's where we're vulnerable, and changed almost our genetic expression of some of the enzymes involved in that system. And so over the years, and those genetic expressions have been passed on. So over the years, people have lost the ability to methylate as well as they should. And that's something that you can get tested for. So if you know that you have a problem with your methylation status, or you suspect that, if you're chronically ill all the time, that then it might be something to do with methylation, you can get tested. It's very easy to test. It's like, I don't know, $40 test or something. And you can find out if there is a problem with some of the enzymes of methylation. And so, but it's very simple. If you do have that problem, you just take an activated B. And so B vitamins can be very, very, very helpful for some people that have the methylation problem. In fact, 1/3 of the population apparently has a problem with the ability to make activated B6. So that's quite a lot of people. So, it's a great idea to take an active B6 supplement. But while you're at it, you may as well take the full whack of vitamin Bs, and just to give yourself a bit more energy, to help your immune system, to help you focus, your concentration, to help the methylation status. And the methylation, as I said, is important for many things, but it helps with detoxification. It helps with hormones and neurotransmitters. It helps with cardiovascular. And it helps with excretion of waste. So it's like a very
stress, right. So we deplete a lot of those things with stress. So, and when there's then the stress and then depletion of those essential nutrients, then our immune system then becomes compromised, and then we can't contain those viruses as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like looking at it from a well-rounded, holistic point of view.
That's correct. And the only other thing I would suggest is maybe fish oils. But again, you want to get a good quality one that's not contaminated with heavy metals or chemicals. And the fish oils make up the membranes of the cells. And our membranes, of course, are the actual brains of the cells, not the nucleus. We can survive without a nucleus. Our cells can survive without a nucleus, but they can't survive without the membranes.
And as that bilipid layer becomes a bit more vulnerable, and that's when we get toxins into the cell. And
right, yeah, and that's aging as well. Like, taking oils is the best anti-aging thing that you can possibly do.
Yeah. I just want to show people your book again, because I love this book.
Thank you.
Nutrition Code. And there's a couple of other books you've mentioned to me over the years that you want to write. One of them, I know that you've told me one recently, but one of them was a mental health one. Yes,
the Nutrition Code. Well, I'm going to call it for emotional health, because, mental health has so many different gradations. And so I'd rather be for the general person, mainstream population that might become a bit anxious from time to time, or a little bit down from time to time, but they have the capacity to help themselves. They have resources where they can connect with other practitioners or people that might be able to support them. But I just want to give them also the tools to support themselves with nutrition, to keep themselves.
A lot of people just don't get that connection at all between, what you're putting in your body and how that's affecting you emotionally as well. So I can't wait for that one to come out, Suzy. When's that going to happen?
Well, October hopefully is.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
I didn't realise it was that.
That's the plan. Might be more like Christmas, but that's the plan.
Oh, that's soon. Oh, that's awesome. And what's the other one you want to write?
Well, that one I've actually done more. I've written several chapters of that. I'm probably a third of the way, or a quarter of the way through it, quarter to a third. And that one's called Biohack Your Way Out of Narcissistic Abuse. So that's a complete different area, but it's amazing how common it is these days. People who have been in a narcissistic abusive relationship, or even just an abusive relationship, and there is a curious thing that happens with people's brains when they get in those situations, and you can see it in some of the things that have happened before, like Stockholm syndrome, or people that get brainwashed, they get kidnapped in the war and taken over by enemy soldiers, and then they get brainwashed into converting. And it's a similar kind of manipulation of the human psyche. Someone who is abusive, they know intuitively, that maybe have never studied it or no one's ever taught them, but they intuitively know how to access those weak spots in our psyche, and particularly vulnerable people who want to please or who have low self-esteem. So there's a whole range of different things that someone can do. I mean, the first thing is self-love, self-esteem, build that up. But there's also, with those biochemical pathways of addiction, there's ways around that as well. And so I just, again, want to give people access to being able to help themselves when they feel trapped and they are looking for solutions.
Yeah, amazing. And when's that one going to be out?
Well, I'm trying to write them both together. So because they do cross over a little. But the biohack your way out of narcissistic abuse is very dear to my heart. So I'm kind of focusing on that one first.
Yeah.
Cool. So that both of them I hope to be out by the end of the year. But
amazing.
I want to get the narcissistic one done first by October and then finish the second one just after.
Awesome. And can you tell our listeners about your Pure Health Solutions and
yes,
where they can find you?
Well, I have a clinic in Summerhill called Pure Health Chiropractic, and we have 4 chiropractors in there, and they're all amazing. And then as well as that, I run another company called Pure Health Solutions, which we import ultra pure vitamins and minerals from the UK and sell them to other practitioners, other healthcare practitioners. And we also distribute the NET range of homeopathics, which again are an amazing adjunct to any practice. I love them. I use them all the time. And within Pure Health Solutions, I then use that as a platform to run seminars on nutrition to support other healthcare practitioners in their journey.
Wonderful. And what's your website?
So www.purehealthsolutions.com.au if you're a practitioner, or purehealthchiropractic.com.au if you are a patient.
And are you on social media at all?
Yes, we do. We have all of the Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm Dr._Pure Health. But with Facebook, we are, I think, just Pure Health Chiropractic or Pure Health Solutions.
Yeah, and your current book, The Nutrition Code, that's on, can you get
Amazon?
It on Amazon?
Yeah, you can get it over through Amazon. Yeah, I think it's available as a Kindle as well.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today and just helping kind of navigate and break all that sort of stuff down so people kind of know that there's plenty they can do to protect themselves and not be so fearful of the current situation. So
yeah, I looked at, and that's just such a good point that you make, is that we are empowered. We do have amazing creative and resilience and creative potential and resilience. The help is out there. There is so much information and we can do it. We don't need to be taken out by fear. That's just counterproductive and it's not going to help at all.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for your wonderful channel.
Pleasure.
And all the good you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Suzy. Same with you. Lots of love.
All right. Much love.
Bye.
Bye.
If you loved or learnt something in this episode, share it. And don't forget to subscribe. I look forward to bringing you next week's Awakening Conversation. Have a wonderful week.